Hello, this is the 29th Sunday in Ordinary Time. In our Gospel today, the Pharisees try to draw Jesus into a political argument. They bring the Herodians with them to ask Jesus about paying the census tax. Now, this was a hot-button issue at the time. The Pharisees, you see, didn't believe in paying the census tax to Caesar, and the Herodians, followers and supporters of the King Herod dynasty, did believe in paying the tax. So whichever way Jesus answered, he was going to be in disagreement with one group or the other. Whether Jesus said they should pay the tax or not, he would be vilified as an enemy of Caesar on the one hand, or an enemy of the people on the other. But since Jesus is Jesus, he gives an answer that makes perfect sense, that sidesteps the political implications and still probably made both groups mad, because he didn't fall in their trap. Jesus asked them for the coin that is used to pay the census tax. And as emperors have done from time immemorial, Caesar had put his face on the money. So when the Pharisees and the Herodians produced the coin to show Jesus, there's Caesar's smiling face stamped right on it. It is interesting to me that Jesus had to ask the Pharisees and the Herodians for one of the coins. Sort of clues us in on his own overall readiness to pay the tax. Of course, we probably should have figured that Jesus wasn't going to have any money in his own pockets. You see, Jesus asked his adversaries whose image, whose inscription is on this money. They answer Caesar, of course. So Jesus tells them to repay to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God. The scripture says, when they heard this, they were amazed, and leaving him, they went away. Now that's always the goal when someone comes up to you and wants to talk about politics. You amaze them, and then they go away. If only it was that easy. I find it interesting that Jesus didn't see the need to get involved in political arguments. He separates the laws and the obligations of the civil authorities from what is expected of us by God. It's a very early argument for the separation of church and state. You let Caesar be Caesar, pay his taxes, follow his laws, be a good citizen, such as you can under the rule of these heathens. But give to God what belongs to God. And what belongs to God? Well, everything. Our lives, yours and mine, our time, our talent, our treasures, our intellects, our will, our effort, everything ultimately belongs to God. While the Caesars of the world are trying to make us worry about a census tax, we should be worried about giving to God what belongs to God. Caesars come and Caesars go. Their laws, their taxes, their politics. God and his truths are enduring. You see, part of what Jesus is saying is that we should put up with the civil authorities, such as they are. But he's also saying don't forget that we belong to a higher power. Don't give ourselves away to the political nonsense of this world. We are not for this world. We are God's people. We are God's children. We are God's possession. And our time here on this earth is limited, far surpassed by our eternal reward in heaven. But we forget sometimes, especially during this election season, and like the Pharisees and the Herodians, we break into these warring factions, worrying about Caesar and his politics. We fight about whether the government should do this or that, whether we should support this policy or that policy, this candidate or that candidate. Even the bishops get in on it. Our own bishop here in Rhode Island sent us all an email, probably similar to what other bishops are sending their priests and deacons. It said that as clergy it is inappropriate to endorse or vilify one candidate or party over the other during the homily. But he said that we should encourage the faithful to have well-informed consciences as they prepare to vote. To that end, the bishops have produced a document available on their website called Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship, and I would encourage each of you to look at it. It discusses many of the moral issues that our politicians weave into their platforms in an effort to curry favor with Christians. We are apparently an important voting bloc, so candidates generally have some religiosity included with their rhetoric. As for the bishop's document, I would only say that in direct contradiction to what Pope Francis says, who says all the issues are the same, the American bishops insist that abortion is the preeminent issue among the issues that we should consider, issues such as the environment, immigration, the poor, healthcare. The Pope says there is no preeminent issue. The American bishops say, yes, there is. The preeminent issue is abortion. Now, I agree with what Pope Francis says. Also in his new encyclical, Fratelli Tutti, when the culture itself is corrupt, and objective truth and universally valid principles are no longer upheld, then laws can only be seen as arbitrary impositions or obstacles to be avoided. You see, without the understanding in our culture that abortion is wrong, without that objective truth being upheld, and while our culture is this corrupt, it doesn't matter what the law is. Laws don't really fix people's morals, and morals are not really Caesar's concern. Like Jesus indicates in the gospel today, we should realize that ultimately we don't belong to Caesar, we belong to God. And what goes on with the government ultimately is of very little importance for our faith and how we conduct our lives. We have to repay to God what belongs to God, regardless of whether Caesar requires it or not, and regardless of whether Caesar is helping us out or not. I only really have one abortion story. Only one time that someone came to me and asked what I thought about whether they should have an abortion or not. One of my tenants came to me. She was 20 years old. She had 18-month-old twins. She had just recently moved into her apartment. She had started a new job at Amazon, and she brought with her a physically abusive boyfriend, who sold dope in the parking lot when he thought nobody was looking. You see, Caesar had previously established that ours was not a tax revenue producing zip code, so we were sort of on our own. What happens in Winburn stays in Winburn is how it was explained to me by a cop when I started working in that neighborhood. So my 20-year-old, technically single mother of 2 toddlers, had just lost her job at Amazon and also just found out she was pregnant with another child of the abusive drug-dealing boyfriend, and she was in the office asking me if I thought abortion was the answer. Now, I don't think she came in the office to talk about abortion. I think she was just planning to tell me that she lost her job and that she wasn't going to be able to pay the rent. It's usually how these types of conversations went. But even though this was not a typical conversation for me, my tenant is typical of people who get abortions. According to the Guttmacher Institute, which is where the bishops get their numbers on abortions, 61% of women who get abortions are in their 20s. My tenant. 59% are already mothers with other children at home. My tenant. 75% are poor, below the federal poverty level. Again, my tenant. These are the people seeking abortions under Caesar's law. Well, I didn't know what to do. I knew I couldn't tell her to have an abortion, but encouraging this poverty-stricken, unemployed single mother of 2 18-month-olds to have another baby with her abusive boyfriend doesn't really sound like a great plan either. I mean, what are we saying? Maybe 3's a charm and he'll stop blacking your eyes every other week if you have another baby. I didn't know what to do, so we prayed. Prayed for her. Prayed for her twin toddlers. We prayed for the baby in her womb. We prayed for guidance. Repay to God what belongs to God. But what belongs to God? Everything. Everything. Me and my life. You and your life. The tenant and her life. The unborn baby, her life. How do we give that little life to God? We prayed and we talked. We talked about how precious that little life inside her was. How much God loved her and that little baby. We talked about how we can't always see or understand God's plan. We can't always see or understand how things are going to work out. We talked about having faith that God's love and God's plan will carry us through the hard times in our lives. She wasn't a regular churchgoer, this girl, but she did go sometimes with her aunt. She knew abortion was wrong, and I think she probably wanted to talk herself out of it because of her knowledge and understanding that it was wrong. Now, I don't think abortion's legal status ever entered her mind. She dated a drug dealer. She lies on her food stamp forms about whether the father of the children lives in the home. She drinks underage. She uses illegal substances. She's stealing cable from her apartment from the neighbors. Strict legality of her actions did not seem to play a role in anything else that she was doing in her life. So I don't think abortion's legal status mattered to her. She knew abortion was wrong because she knew abortion was wrong morally. Caesar's laws are arbitrary impositions unless you have the moral compass to know what's right and wrong. She knew what was right. She wanted to do the right thing, but sometimes the right thing is hard to see how to do. So I did what I could to help this one girl in this one situation, to repay to God what belongs to God. I gave her a job part-time in the office, a job that came with a free apartment like the other employees. Now, before you think I was doing something extraordinary, I was not. We needed a new receptionist. I had just been working on putting together a help wanted ad earlier in the day. And as far as the apartment, she just told me she lost her job and she wasn't going to be able to pay the rent. So there was no money coming in for that apartment anyway. And I would have had to evict this pregnant single mother of twin toddlers, assuming she didn't have an abortion. And by the time we got a court date, she would have been showing, which would have been a really bad look for me down at the courthouse in Lexington, Kentucky, with all those tenant-friendly judges to be down there trying to evict the pregnant lady with her 2 screaming babies in tow. Already had a bad reputation down there at the courthouse anyway. So it was really just making lemonade out of lemons to give this girl a job and an apartment. But it did provide for her stable housing and stable income so that she could envision how she would have a third child in her young life. I told her that she should get rid of the abusive boyfriend, is my opinion, and he did leave for a while when he got busted, but she took him back when he got out in a few months. By that time, she was on bed rest, and her due date was near. She ended up moving back in with her mother to have the baby, which was better for everybody because she wasn't much of a receptionist, and we really needed to rent that apartment to a paying customer. She had the baby, and we lost touch. That's how it is sometimes. Now, smarter and more cynical people than me would have assumed that she was lying all along, that she was just looking for a handout from the soft-hearted landlord. Maybe she never was planning an abortion. It was all just a ruse. But honestly, so what if it was? I felt like God brought me into her life at that moment to be a sympathetic ear, to affirm what she already knew about abortion, and to try to help her. In the end, God got what belongs to him, another beautiful human life. And who knows who that little baby will grow up to be? What we do know is God loves her, and that our earth is better off with her in it. Now, pretty soon we'll have another Catholic on the Supreme Court, and they may finally overturn Roe v. Wade. Lord knows we Christians have pushed for this a long time. We Christians have voted for this for a long time. But Roe v. Wade is not what leads people to have abortions, and overturning it won't stop people from having abortions. Without the morality to understand something is wrong, laws are just arbitrary impositions. And even understanding something as wrong is still sometimes not enough. My tenant knew in her heart that abortion is wrong, but she really couldn't see how doing the right thing was going to be possible. She couldn't provide for the kids that she had. She couldn't keep a roof over the kids that she had. She couldn't hold a job for the kids that she had. Having another baby isn't going to make any of that easier. Sometimes people feel that doing the right thing is too hard and they need help to make it possible. Because we have to give to God what belongs to God, and sometimes that means that we have to give to another what God has so generously given to us. Sometimes that means we have to help someone in ways that are a burden for us. Sometimes we have to make it possible for someone to do the right thing, even if it's the harder thing for us and for them to do. Now, can Caesar help make it possible for people to do the right thing? Of course he can. But Caesar's not in the habit of doing the right thing unless the constituents demand it, and even then, it's hit or miss. We have to figure out how to help young mothers to realize how having a baby is really going to be possible in their lives if we want them to have babies instead of abortions. Because most poor 20-somethings who make up the majority of people seeking abortions with an unplanned pregnancy, they have no idea how they'll be able to pull off having another kid. Overturning Roe v. Wade makes abortion harder because red state residents will have to travel to blue states to get one, or use one of the numerous home procedures that have been in use for thousands of years before we had state-sanctioned medical procedures. Without the moral compass that prohibits intrinsic evil, laws are just arbitrary impositions. They are mere obstacles to be overcome. We can't just leave it up to Caesar and his laws to give to God what belongs to God. We have to do the work. We have to make it happen, even if we don't really see how it's possible. We have to have faith that God will see it through and that he will take care of us, especially if we're trying to do his will to help these mothers in their time of great uncertainty. We have to have hope that goodness will prevail, and we can help mothers do the right thing and carry their baby to term. And we have to operate with unconditional love in our hearts for our fellow human beings around us, love that calls us to do whatever it takes to protect and nurture the mother and the life in her womb, and the mother and the life that comes after the baby is born. Faith, hope, and love is how we really do God's work, not with politics, legislation. So give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and that's usually pretty easy because all Caesar ever really wants is money. Giving to God what belongs to God is the hard part, the part that takes real sacrifice, real morals, real faith, and real work. And despite what they tell us, Caesar's laws won't help us with any of that.